Welcome to Together We Launch Resiliency Podcast. This podcast creates resiliency and inspiration for all. Hi, my name is Alyssa Kaplan. I'm the creator of Together We Launch Resiliency Podcast. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in many schools, nonprofits, agencies, and businesses. I've taught thousands of children and worked with well over hundreds of parents and families. I also had the honor of serving Willowbrook class clients and founded a program called Together We Launch that's currently being used through Easter Seals New York Preschool. I'm currently the school social worker at New York Easter Seals. Often in Together We Launch podcasts, we have speakers who overcome stigma and social isolation related to a developmental disability. Today, we have an extra special guest who I know would not want me to call him extra special because he knows from his work everyone is special. And we can take away more life lessons than we could imagine from everyone. But he is a professional in the field who I am delighted to share with you today. If I had only one person that I could share the knowledge from to give insight into the world that includes those with developmental disabilities and psychiatric challenges, this is the person I would want you to hear. He has a medical background and he chose the field to work in the field of helping those with the most severe and challenging developmental and psychiatric challenges. Dr. Reidenberg is a board-certified pediatrician and has cared for developmental disability children and adults for decades. He received his undergraduate degree and his medical degree from Cornell University and did his pediatric residency at New York Presbyterian College. He is currently the medical director of Hudson Valley Region for New York State Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, where he supervises and cares for over 750 severely disabled adults. We worked together several years ago in a group home for severely disabled psychiatrically ill adults, and Dr. Reidenberg stood out to me as one with compassion and care and enthusiasm for his work. Thank you for sharing with us today, Dr. Reidenberg.
Thank you for that kind introduction.
So you're sharing with us decades of work and some insight that we can share with parents. So after working for decades as a physician for individuals with developmental disabilities, can you share 3 insights that you wish that parents with young children with special needs knew?
Sure. The first is that you are not alone. There are lots of other parents who have children with special needs. And even though it feels very isolating, you are not alone. And that's very important to know. Because children are unique and each child's needs are unique, and this is true for every parent, not just a parent of a special needs child. There are often times when parents feel overwhelmed and alone, and that's not how the real world is. You just need to be open to getting help, and that's true for every parent, not just a parent with special needs. Second thing is there are wonderful people out there who want to help you. Even for people whose children are not obviously in the special needs category. So many people are interested in making your lives easier and helping out someone. You don't realize where this strength could come from next. And the other thing is, like all parents, someone's going to ridicule your child, and it hurts, and it's very hard to overcome that pain. And one of the skills that needs to be developed is to ignore the ridiculing. And that's true for every parent, but for special needs parents, that can be more true than for others.
Thank you so much for that insight. In the past, I know you felt it had been an honor to serve the individuals with developmental disabilities with such...
Still do.
You still do. Excellent. And that's just more decades upon decades. You do it with such continuity, week after week, day after day, being able to see some of the same people and watch them grow, watch them develop, watch them live and love. And many doctors don't have that opportunity to experience such patients, decades with the same one, and be able to observe them each week. What have you learned, and what would you like to share with parents who may care for their children with developmental disabilities on a continuous and long-term and sometimes tedious and tiring basis?
Sure. Well, first of all, from the medical perspective, it's not tedious and tiring because I get to see many different patients. I'm not seeing one person every day, 24 hours a day, like a real parent. I think one of the things that's really magical about the way New York State cares for its patients is the continuity of care that our practitioners have. And this is one of the things that I had expressed to Alyssa years ago when we worked together of how much I enjoyed this because of the ability to see growth, even in the most disabled. And I think this is something that people don't realize, and that even severely disabled people change. And today's interactions are not predictive of someone's whole life. And so things that appear hopeless at one moment may be not hopeless and in fact hopeful at another moment. and people's achievements are different based on their abilities, but it's still an achievement. And many times we can celebrate what seem to be very small things that make a huge difference in someone's quality of life. Another thing I'd want to share is that each doctor's experience with developmental disability is limited. Even doctors who spend their whole career taking care of developmental disabilities, we actually have very few groups of patients with the same disease. Most of our patients have completely different conditions. And so it's hard to extrapolate information from such a small patient population. I feel right now where I supervise 750 patients, that's a big population. But from the point of view of understanding a disease, that's actually very small. And I can't make statistical comparisons on such a small population, which means it's very difficult for me to predict future functioning because I've probably taken care of only 4 or 5 people with the exact same condition moving forward. And it's just too small a population to know what's going to come in the future. And so when you meet someone whose wall is full of diplomas such as mine, and you think that they can tell the future, in fact, we're judging from a very small database, and our judgment is the best it can be with the limited resources we have, but it's not a pure prediction of the future. And so that's one of the things that's also a little harder for being a parent of a special needs kid than being a parent of a child who is neurotypical, because most parents want to know, will my child go to college? And the answer is, I don't know. They're only 5 years old. And that's the same thing for every parent. But some parents of special needs kids will want to know much harder questions. And it's very hard to say, I don't know, the child is still young, to parents who are desperate and in need of help. And so the doctors are doing the best they can with the experience they have. And I want people to recognize that even a doctor in a large practice of developmental disabilities doesn't have a lot of experience with each individual syndrome.
Excellent. I think that's very important for parents to take away, that even the doctor who they turn to might not have the answers that they're looking for, and that to just keep doing the things to support their child and realize that nobody can completely predict their child's future. And in terms of education, we have new ways of having education, whether it's online, whether it's in person and online virtually, whether it's subtitled, whether we have reading devices and Alexas things we've never had before and kids are growing up with. So it's an exciting time in the field of developmental differences. Can you please speak about your perception of the impact of stigma and social isolation on some individuals with developmental disabilities? Based on your observations and your experiences, what are your thoughts on how parents can help prevent it and decrease it from their child experiencing it or react to it in positive ways? I know you touched on some of it.
Sure. Well, first of all, this is a general problem of all parents. Every child gets picked on in almost every society. This is a universal problem. If a child is tall or short, blonde hair, red hair, anybody who's physically weak, children really start off uncivilized and have to be taught how to behave toward others. Disabled children are more frequently the victim, and they're often more severely victimized than other children. So it's important for a parent to be alert and to try to figure out the difference between routine childhood cruelty, which is human cruelty, and something more dangerous. And positive ways to react are tough. And I think one of the things to consider is to reach out to the insensitive, significant person in your child's life and try to understand when they were picked on and remind them of when they were a victim and try to link that significant person's behavior toward your child with their previous experiences so they can recognize their bullying behavior if it's a bullying problem. And moving forward, it's really recognition that this is an experience of almost all human beings. And it's really the severity that's the difference in people with special needs. And that most everyone has had a childhood experience that will be similar to your child's, although possibly not as extreme. And to use that as a wellspring on which to build a new relationship.
Thank you for that. That is one of the things that Together We Launch podcast can help parents do, because it is taking what sometimes people would have hiding their pain and their stories, and by sharing them, parents and children and the professional community, one of the things they say about bullying is you put a flashlight on a cockroach and then they run. And so if we enlighten the bullying behaviors and also teach people how to deal with them, it can really make an impact. And the research does show that children with developmental disabilities do have a higher prevalence of this. And that's why it's so important that parents, if they can be aware of how they can help and shield their child to the best they can, but also help their child learn resiliency as well at the same time. Can you share any stories with us of individuals with developmental disabilities that left a lasting impression on you?
Sure. And I think on the topic of bullying, this is a particularly meaningful one for me. I was taking care of a gentleman in his 40s who was psychiatrically ill and intellectually disabled, and he was very violent. And he really didn't understand the consequences of his actions. And he would look for people who are weaker than he was to exercise his violence upon them. And I found out that his younger brother, who now in his 30s was significantly larger and stronger than his older brother, had really been bullied and beaten as a child. And his parents were unsuccessful in protecting him, eventually had to place my patient in state care. And I was shocked when the younger brother asked me for a meeting, and he wanted to advocate for his older brother's better life. Yeah. And I knew how violent his older brother was. And I imagined what this man's childhood must have been, where he could not protect himself physically from his older brother, and his parents could not protect him from his older brother. And ultimately, his older brother had to be placed. And he was placed in state care instead of in prison because he just didn't understand what he was doing. He didn't have the intellectual capability for that. And here is the younger brother in his 30s now, a grown man who has understood his brother's function, understood his brother's limits, understood his parents' limits in not being able to protect him from this horrific childhood, and comes with love to me to make his older brother's life better. And it was just such a lesson in love. And the two brothers do have a relationship. The older brother's psychiatric illness is not curable at this time. He continues to be violent, including toward his younger brother, who is now huge compared to him. And they still have regular visits. I have seen them get along at times, and it has just been a beautiful thing that carries with me. And I've had other experiences of people whose behavior's out of control, whose siblings and parents have been the victims of that behavior, who continue to advocate for their loved one and express that kind of love. I must also say that I don't want to make this sound like everyone is violent. I just want people to be aware that this is a big concern, and that from the outside, you would look at a family like this and say, I want them put away, and that's not how real human beings are. And to see the love that comes through in these horrible, challenging situations is just so beautiful. And in many ways, it makes it worth all the work I did doing the studying so that I could be present to help families in this situation.
Wow. That is very meaningful. I felt that in my heart. And I hope that even if young people should hear that podcast, that they continue in their schooling journey and keep learning, touch on the limits, the learning, the things that people don't realize on the outside, what you gain on the inside. And a lot of people don't ever have that love in their life that you saw with the siblings, or be able to express it. I mean, that's really powerful. And the parents. Sometimes parents are inundated with a variety of medical information and opinions for their child's special need. Sometimes questioning or trying to get or give information to a medical professional can be intimidating. Do you have any insight from a physician's perspective that you would like to share that could help parents communicate with child's doctor or specialist or other providers that works with their child or that sees their child?
Oh, yes. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to your listeners about this. I often talk to families who have worked very hard to develop a technical understanding, who take great pride in using the technical words. And when I meet with them, I'm often confused because they don't have a full understanding, and their use of technical words, if I trust it completely, will lead me in the wrong direction. And so I think educating yourself about the diseases and conditions is critically important. But when you talk to a physician, express your concerns in your own words. I understand the biochemistry of the disease. That's not the big issue between us when we talk. What's really the big issue between us is something's not right with your child, and you're not sure what it is, and I'm not sure what it is, and we need to explore it together. But I can't see a change in behavior. That has to be described by the family. And in the words that it actually happens. What did you actually see? What did you observe? Not what you think it means, because that's always hard to figure out. But what did you really see? That is extremely helpful in bringing a problem to a solution very quickly. There is a really difficult issue with certain physicians and other practitioners who enjoy the power of their position. And there's certainly a concern in whether you as the parent are being manipulated in some way. And I think it's very important to express your desperation if you're in that situation. Let us know how many times you've tried to solve this problem, how many blind alleys you've been down. That gives us a lot of information so that we don't make the same mistakes together a second time. The other thing is it will help establish trust. And some of the power dynamics are there because there's been manipulation on other patients' part of this particular doctor in the past, and he's reading that into you, just as you read the kindliness of a previous doctor into the new doctor. And so letting us know where you are in your journey is very important. And establishing a relationship of trust is absolutely critical. Many people get referred to great physicians, and something isn't just right. Maybe the physician is more interested in a research project than your particular person that you want to care for. Maybe the physician is particularly tired that day. Whatever it is, if your antennae are up, that is a very important thing to pay attention to. And it doesn't matter how many great papers that professor has written. If you're not getting along with that professor at that moment, it's not a good relationship. And don't be afraid to back away. It may be totally irrational. Maybe he looks like your uncle and you didn't like your uncle. And with therapy, you could come to have a trusting relationship. But it's so hard to take care of a disabled person that kind of investment of going to therapy so you can tolerate being around someone who looks like your uncle that you didn't like isn't worth it. There are a few practitioners who are superb in any field of medicine. There's always more than one. So just because this is the great practitioner doesn't mean it's the only great practitioner. So if there's something about this practitioner that has you concerned, walk away. Find another one. One of the great things about American medicine is that you are the boss.
Wow. What has been your most significant insight to humanity based on decades of working with individuals with developmental disabilities and delays? If parents could remember just one thing that you would want them to share, what would that be?
So I think the thing that I want families to remember is that you're not alone. That is so important. And there are good people out there who want to help you, many times in surprising positions. And so it's not always the people who are the professional caregivers, but there are a lot of people out there, good people, who want to help you. I think the observing part of me, of being a doctor and getting to be with people in their time of crisis, is how important love is and how much more important it is than intelligence. And the love that I've seen and been privileged to be present during these times of crisis and see love emerge when you never expect it is just extraordinary. And it's one of the things that I think is one of the great rewards of being a physician, is that from my studying and my practice and my experience, I'm invited in to these times of family crisis to help. And while I'm doing that, I get to watch a family come together and I get to watch the love exchange.
Wow. Is there anything else that we didn't touch upon that you think would be helpful? Because I think you've wrapped up decades of experience. This information should not be taken lightly because it can be very useful. And when days are dark and times are hard and you need to still go on and you need to keep your resiliency, you can hear this and remember it.